Now, according to statistics, South Africa can be considered a violent country due to the high crime rate and other incidents of violence. With the pressures of everyday life and work, these traumatic events and incidents, whether experienced directly or indirectly, may cause a lot more damage to our well-being than what we think, and may end up severely affecting us. Now, joining us in studio today is the Managing Director for the Independent Counselling and Advisory Services, Andrew Davies. He's here to provide us with expert advice to employers, but also to you out there on how to better manage the fallout. A very good morning to you, Andrew. Thank you for joining us.
Good to be here.
Yes, there's lots of issues with violence in our country and so forth, but is there a scenario playing out in the sort of wider psyche of the nation where we kind of have a siege mentality a little bit? And does it play out on the roads and in the workplace and the like?
Certainly, if you live in a traumatized society where there are high incidents of crime, it does increase the level of anxiety amongst people, and people tend to be a lot more itchy and scratchy and prone to act out themselves. Now,
violence in general is on the increase in South Africa. Not so much crime per se, but we see general incidents of violence from husbands killing wives, wives killing husbands, children being murdered, and so forth. All these kinds of things are playing itself out. Why do you think there is this increase, it seems, in violent crimes in South Africa?
I'm not entirely sure if it's increased substantially. I think it fluctuates over time. The one thing that is true is that it's consistently high in our society, and I think that that's problematic. I think violence has become in some ways a way of managing difficulties, a way of dealing with conflict within a family, deal with it through violence, the way of dealing with strike action. So we see with strikes that often turn violent, the way of dealing with problems with foreigners. It all turns out to be violent. It's seen as a solution, as a way of trying to manage difficulties.
How do you manage this in the workplace, and how does it affect the individual professionally? I would like to see first, because I do think, in the workplace sometimes, we start to act out a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I think firstly, trauma differs from individual to individual. Some of it's more severe than others. But the one thing that all trauma has in common is that it has a profound effect on us. So after a trauma, people experience intense feelings of fear, of sadness, of anger, and that's going to play out in their lives in general. So it affects the way in which we think and feel and behave, our sense of security that we have. And obviously, that's then going to affect the way in which we function in our lives in general. But in the workplace, we're going to be distracted by that, and that impacts on our performance. We will be absent more often, we will be distracted, and we may even become dysfunctional or a risk to the business. For example, if we have to carry a firearm or something like that.
Well, what about somebody like me, who works in the media, mainstream, for the last 20 years now, more than 20 years actually? The effect that dealing with these kinds of violence and levels of violence every day, is there an element of, say, a post-traumatic stress disorder that you can develop that desensitizes you a little bit?
Certainly, post-traumatic stress disorder is one potential consequence of being exposed chronically to incidents of violence and violent crime. And I think it's kind of vicariously that you're exposed to it. You might not be a victim yourself, but when you hear about it all the time through the media, it is going to have an impact on you, how you think and feel and behave, your sense of personal safety. And that obviously skews your perception of the world.
You guys are trying to manage this process with business. What advice do you give to business owners, business leaders now in coming to terms with this almost insidious problem that runs as an undercurrent in our society?
Yeah. Well, firstly, organizations have a duty of care responsibility to look after the welfare and well-being of their employees. But it's not just a tears and tissue welfare type of issue. It has commercial relevance as well, because unhappy and unhealthy employees are not productive. So organizations need to have employee assistance programs in place that help traumatized employees to recover and get back to productive employment. These programs will help to debrief individuals, provide them with counseling and support, and help to reintegrate them in the workplace after they've experienced a traumatic event.
And what about the individual? What advice do you give to someone who's struggling right now at work because of a violence-related incident or someone who's experienced a criminal activity?
Yeah. The first thing, I think, is to ensure that you're educated about the impact that a trauma has on you. Because I think there are ways of coping. There are good ways and bad ways. So drinking is a way of coping. It's just not a good way of coping.
Yeah.
Getting professional help, which will help you to anticipate what to expect, how to manage that appropriately, how to deal with the emotions and thoughts and feelings that you have, is critical. You may need to go for some kind of counselling, but certainly you need to activate the type of support that's necessary to enable you to recover from that. The majority of people do recover effectively from traumatic incidents if they get the right kind of help and support.
In conclusion, how much untreated mental illness do you think we have roaming our streets right now in South Africa?
I think there certainly is a lot, and more than there should be. I think we have a mentality in this country of a cowboys don't cry attitude, whereas in today's world, I think reaching out for help is seen as a strength, not a weakness. Getting that kind of help and support often means that we can play a preemptive role and prevent people from going on to develop more severe mental health problems like depression or substance abuse problems.
Well, Andrew, I thank you for joining us today and giving us a unique insight into some of the problems, not just in our country, around the world. The world's becoming more and more violent. It's playing itself out throughout society, schools, even the like. If you're having a problem, if you can't deal with it, seek help. It's okay. We live in the 21st century. You can go and talk to people and sort out your problem. We all are struggling.